Any other comments anyone wants to make?
I mean,
Yes.
make one comment, take a couple minutes of your time. As Earl Howell III, most people know me as Trey, and I'm the chairman of the business committee for the Ponca Tribe. And I want to thank you for the audience you've given us tonight, and appreciate your time listening to us. This is an issue we've continued to deal with as far as educating our kids, and basically comes down to numbers. You know, we talked about the buses that come to Whiteville. You have these couple buses full of these little kids, all energetic, cheerful, coming into school. But come May, time to walk across that stage, that number is a lot smaller. You know, so where is what's going on here? And we all know there's not one answer to this problem. You know, we're trying to hit it from all these different angles. Chris and Kelly's talked about his different programs, and there are tons of issues, and we're trying to help, and we're not unique to problems anywhere else, and we have some issues, internet being one of them. We're told that they're just old copper lines run to, not even individual homes can get DSL. Our tribal buildings, don't have it. We've got 2 buildings that have T1 line, which are even slow in today's standards. And we're told by AT&T, that's the consumers' problem, that they're not going to run fiber to our community off the highway. So we're looking at some grants and hopefully fixing that. And soon we'll put up a communication tower. We're partnering with BIA and Oklahoma Highway Patrol, and we're hoping they'll help with providing Wi-Fi to the community and our tribal buildings. Those buildings that do have it, they're getting it from HughesNet satellite, which is supposed to be high speed, but it's not faster than power. They're paying outrageous prices. So, the private education, as well as provide services for our adults and programs, and these programs we offer our kids, and what I look at is well, we're not asking for special attention, because you would have to ask, you'd probably be approached by another race, why are you giving attention to these Indians over here? I'm Black or Mexican or Chinese, why don't you give that to us? We're not asking for that, but we're just trying to maintain our identity as well, because we're not, I look at it as being disadvantaged compared to people I know on a reservation. We don't have a reservation. We have a community, Indian land, and what I mean by a reservation, I'll reference to, say, one of the Sioux tribes in South Dakota. My background is law enforcement. I went to training from people I knew, became friends that are from that community, and within their reservation, which could be probably a quarter the size of Oklahoma, and so within that they have their own towns, they have their own schools, their own stores, their own colleges, and so within that you have your own operations. Like you can dictate what's going to be taught there. So they maintain their language. Our language is dying. There's a handful of people that still speak. So if that's gone, what makes me or us different from anybody, whatever race, what makes me an Indian, and so we're struggling to hold on to that and keep our identity as native, as Ponca, and I don't see, our community is 5 miles south, I don't see one separate from Ponca City. Anytime I've gone somewhere, I said, my hometown's Ponca City. That's where I grew up and was raised. Ponca City is named after the Ponca tribe. There were some people that were surprised thinking, oh, we're named after Ponca City. Well, it's not like that. So, the Ponca tribe has on average about 200 jobs, and I've seen some partnerships with the city grow since I've been there, and we're glad to see that. We're glad to see the city of Ponca City in different areas, reach out and want to partner with the tribe, and we've made all attempts that we can at that, and Ponca Development Board, he's been very helpful in that. The Chamber of Commerce, and, they even funded a feasibility study for a project we're working on. And, but those 200 jobs, I was talking to David one day, and I said, you know what? Yeah, they're Ponca tribal jobs, 200 of them or so, and I said, but they're not Ponca tribe jobs. They're Ponca city jobs, and you might think of a Ponca tribal employee, that's tribe down there. Well, that's Ponca city job, because where does that money go? Where does that salary go? We don't have stores, we don't have a gas station, we don't have any of those. So that money gets spent in this community. Taxes go, so it goes back to education and everywhere else that, it's divided. So, so for some people say, oh, those Indians, they don't pay taxes, they don't contribute to the funds that pay for education. That's wrong, because all those jobs, that money comes to Ponca City. Our whole community is not Ponca City. We pay electric, and so myself, and I think most people, they don't see ourselves as different from Ponca City. We're Ponca City residents, and we're just a little further south. And I grew up not in White Eagle, but just outside of White Eagle, Mino Vine. So we're doing everything we can to help our kids and to increase that number from, if we can track every one of those kids from our Head Start to everyone from preschool to kindergarten. Like I said, that bus full of kids needs to be a bus full of high school that one day. I hope it's a problem for our bus systems. Hey, we need another bus because all these kids are, graduating. So, that's a problem, I wouldn't mind having. But I'm glad that the city of Ponca City has, from what I've seen, in different areas, worked with the tribe, and I appreciate the audience you've given us, and we continue to work on our end. There is, like I said, there is no one problem. It's going to take a team, and unfortunately, there are some kids that we're just trying to not let fall through the cracks. For those, for instance, I've got 3 kids. 2 of them graduated from Ponca City within the past 5 years, and I've got a 10-year-old at Garfield. But my 2 oldest, I'm not a perfect parent, but I try my best, and I think monitoring, being involved in everything they do, from their sports to academics, and I think it's something different now. But at that time when they were in school, there was a Parent Connect. I think it's called something different now, but I was on that, and not all the parents for their kids out there have that ability. But I log in, and I could see it any time. Hey, you guys have homework. Now I go, well, I'm going to check. Oh, what about this? So, and then I get an email if they missed a class. So they rarely miss a class because I'd be calling them, tracking them down, and hey, why does it say that you missed this one class? Why does it, kind of bird dogging them. But sometimes that's what it takes. That's what being a parent is. And that's what I did, and I make sure they go to bed, in a routine, and do their homework, and I told them, you know what? Every time you get mad, I said, when you have seniors, juniors, seniors, you're 17, 18, and then you get mad and say, hey, Dad, look how old I am. I start at bedtime. Oh, yeah, and you have to. And I said, you go through all these years of dealing with me, and then you're walking across that stage, getting your diploma. You're not going to turn around and say, look what you made me get, Dad. And they're not going to regret that, but I try, but unfortunately, some of our kids don't have that support. So that's where we're trying to fill in the gaps and provide that to those that need it, because not all of them have that same support. So I don't take too much of your time, and I don't sure I'm gonna forget something as soon as I sit down or walk out, but, I do thank you for your time, and Chris, and, you know, I hear things overtime and griping, and, you know, I just wanted to come here myself, you know, and hear it for myself, so when someone asks me, you know, well, show up, you know, and go to those board meetings, go and ask these questions, and we'll have people come, Tilly or someone else, and still be the voice for those that can. But, you know, even when we have meetings in our community, it's hard to get people involved. And, you know, you gripe all day, but you don't want to, you know, bring that voice, put it on paper or read to us. So, it's a fight, it's a war, it's not a battle, you know, we trying to fight for these kids, and like I said, hopefully fill that bus up with high scores instead of just small kids.
Terry?
Also, there was a comment that they cannot get their progress reports because they don't have internet. And if any parent that needs a copied, the school will do that for them.
You guys have a third party for like us programs that deal with the kids? Or how do you do like an MOU, like, so we can watch their grades if they do fail? We step in and we try to help them, so they don't fail. You know, maybe that parent's not there to watch their grades. So then we as programs, we're there to try to, but see, we don't have that, third party.
The parents,
Whatever you guys are needing.
the parents would have to go in and log in and give you that information and provide that information to you. And they can come up to the school and we can, okay? So they can help you. I mean, we have ways that we can help get them logged on and they can give you that signing information and you can, but the parents would have to supply it to you.
Or they're already failing. We want
Also,
attention before that.
The Title VII assistants are making calls, regarding attendance and grades positive, not just negative calls, but, they're doing that on a regular basis, and they send us, it's up on a Google Doc, so that Chris has access to that, I have access to that. So they have really stepped that up in the last couple of years, and as far as the tutoring that occurs during the school day, I'm working in the East West in high school, but I know it happens, at all three sites, because I see, the Title VII aide at, a weekly note out to all faculty members with the kids' names, and then she will be working individually with those kids. So those things are happening, during the school day. As I said, I know more about secondary, I just don't know that much about elementary, but they're receiving, the same interventions that, you know, the regular kids.
You guys also talk about, the teachers do, take-home newsletters or something like that? If those also can be mailed to, I do the newsletter for the tribe, the Ponca tribe, and I would be more than welcome to put that in there so that parents, whatever they're doing, because not most of the time, they might not make it home.
This
They
says
were-
that
it's still a bad.
assistants could just email her their school
We could
newsletter.
do that, we do send them, we're still sending home the kids too. I mean,
Okay.
But
And
we
as
take
for
that
the-
extra step to get
Getting
it
the
to the
kids,
parents.
raising things up, and ask Melody on more orientation to supplies with third-party releases. And if we add those, we could do that. Get the parents' permission. One, I'll let them sign up for it. That was part of, when I went to JLN, that was part of the application. We didn't fill that part out, we didn't get assistance.
We just want to say thanks again for coming tonight. You know, it takes a lot to help kids. I mean, it's probably tougher today to be a kid than it's ever been. It's probably harder to be a parent today than it's ever been. And so we appreciate your willingness to work with the children that you work with, and you know, our doors are open, and we're obviously You know, if it's an elementary issue, Ms. Vogel is the best one to talk to about that. Ms. Cusick is with the secondary schools, and of course, you have a great liaison here with Chris, and we just would encourage you to use that. And again, we appreciate what you do with the kids. We appreciate the extra time and effort that you're putting in for other people's kids, you know, because you guys have all raised yours. So we appreciate this.
See how much dialogue develops, you know,
Yep.
everybody comes up here. And that's what you need to have, communication. And, I'm impressed now by things going on. Hopefully that first step's been taken and it can continue. And just getting the word to each other, you know, get some communication going. I feel good about it, and so I'm glad I was here
If
tonight.
I didn't get the Sunday newspaper, I wouldn't be here. I just didn't get, I mean, no email, no flyer, nothing. If I didn't get it, I wouldn't be here. So if there's something, more communication, with the tribe, if you send it to Trey Howe, he has a tribal email, and be able to, network with you guys. We're ready to. We were 100% for our kids.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, at this time, we need a motion to go back into our session.
I'll make a motion to go back to
Judy,
session.
Second?
Second.
Vote?
Mr. Newsom?
Aye.
Mr. Riley?
Aye.
Mrs. Troop? Mr. Clark?
Aye.
Dr. Kincaid?
Aye.
Thank you very much. All right. At this time, thank you, Chris. Appreciate all the work you do. At this time, the superintendent's report.
Just wanted to discuss three items with the board, and I'll go through this pretty quickly. You have this in front of you, and I apologize for it not being on our big screen, but we've got technical difficulties tonight, so you don't get to have it in big print. There's a lot of discussion about school funding. December 21st, the State Excise Board will meet, and that's the group that will look at Oklahoma revenue and will make the preliminary estimation of revenue for the 2016-2017 fiscal year. So there's been lots of speculation about how much revenue we're going to have or how much we're not going to have, and we don't have the answer to that right now. You're all aware that we have a state question that we think will be on the ballot, having to do with a 1 cent sales tax to support higher ed, common ed, and career tech. But I thought I'd just try to give you because I know you'll get questions, and so I thought I'd just try to, this is stuff you've seen before, but I just want to show it to you once again. The first chart you have in front of you is total state funding for K-12 education since 2008. And if you look at that, you'll see on this list that Oklahoma is 9th, and that our funding is down 15.3% since 2008. So that's total state funding. So that's, you hear reports where somebody will say, well, we're spending more money on education than we did in we put X number of dollars into public schools. And that's true, but when you break that out on a per student basis, despite the additional dollars that have been put in, we still have 15.3% less in 2008 today than we had in 2008. The next chart is just general fund dollars. So that's the money that goes to operate our schools, okay? When you think about the school funding formula, when we talk about what the legislature's, what the excise board's going to do and how much money we're going to have to spend next year, well, that's general fund dollars. That's our state aid budget. And if you look at that, we lead the nation in cuts, and that we have 24.2% less than we did in 2008. The next chart is just for this year, And yes, the legislature did, or at least you heard, well, we held education harmless in the last budget session. We didn't cut you as much. We cut other state agencies, we didn't cut education. And that's true, but even with that, we have 1.6% less in the 15-16 school year on a per-student basis than we had in the 2014-15 school year. The next one is just a little, I just kind of can't help but give this one in that the states, that 4 of the 5 states that have the deepest K-12 cuts also cut income taxes. And you can see that Oklahoma is the leader in those cuts, and that we not only cut income taxes, but we also cut corporate income taxes since 2008. The next one shows you the growth in students since the FY 2009. And you can look and see that we grew 45,000 students in 2009, 22,000 in 2010, 23,000 in 2011, 22,000 in 2012, 29,000 in 2013, 30,000 in 2014, and 30,000 in 2015. So somebody that's a better mathematician than I am can do that, but that's probably about 200,000 kids, 150, 200,000 more students than we had in 2009. So because of that, because we have more kids, and because our funding is on a per-student basis, if you're not increasing funding at a level to pay for student growth, then you're going to have less revenue to spend. It's just pretty simple. We have more patrons, we have more customers than we had in 2008. The next sheet is one that those of you that went to the OSSBA conference got a copy of, and that's the one that shows the difference between Oklahoma and what our neighboring states spend on a per pupil basis. And you can see that of the 5 states that Kansas, Arkansas, New Mexico, Texas, and Oklahoma, that we have the second highest enrollment. We have almost 700,000 students. The largest state is Texas with a little over 5 million students. In New Mexico, they have 337,000 students. Kansas has got 486,000, and Arkansas has 483,000. And then you can look and see how much we spend compared to these states on a per pupil basis. And that of those 5 states, we are the lowest with $8,515. Now that, you may look at that and go, now wait a minute, where's that coming from? That's on an enrollment basis, not a weighted ADM basis. So when you see, a little bit later, you're going to see a calculation of how much we've lost per weighted ADM. The way our funding formula works, we're funded on weighted ADM. And what's weighted ADM? So that's a student, and then we assign weights to kids. So like a first grade student counts as 1.2. A fourth grader counts as 1. A high school student is 1.2. A special education student, depending on their disability, we may get another point, another weight for them. We may get 2 weights. We may get 5 weights. A student that is economically disadvantaged is worth 0.6. So all these factors go in together, and so an individual child may be worth 10 weights to us, okay? So weighted average daily membership is the number we typically use, but in this one, you're just looking at per pupil spending based upon enrollment. And what you can see on that is that the state that we're closest to in per pupil spending is Texas, but they spend $2,000, a little bit over $2,100 more per student than we do. And then you can look and see what the deficit is, that for us to catch Texas, it would take almost $900 million more dollars than we're spending right now in education in Oklahoma. The next sheet is kind of the bottom line sheet. What does all this mean to us? Okay? So we have $198 less per weighted ADM than we had in 2008. In FY16, when we've got our allocation notice in July, it was based on a weighted average daily membership of 8,293 students. 293.44, I don't know who that .44 of a kid is, but we've got a .44 somewhere. If you multiply that by $198, in this district this year, we have $1,642,101.12 less in our budget than we would have had if we were still funded at the same per student level that we were in 2008, 2009. And it's been about that number ever since 2008. So over the last, what is that? We're at 2015, 2008. The last 7 years, it's probably about in the neighborhood of $10 million less that we've had to spend to educate students in Ponca City, to hire teachers, to give salary increases, to hire new personnel than we would have had if we were funded the way we were in 2008, 2009. So that's just some FYI stuff for your information. Want to talk a little bit about ESSA. That is the new federal law that regulates how is federal policy toward education. That stands for the Every Student Succeeds Act. It eliminates No Child Left Behind. It eliminates the waivers that the Department of Ed has been granting for the last 4 years. Basically, what it really does is, for the first time in the last 25 years, it returns some control of public education back over to the states. So what are the states going to get to decide? Well, they don't get to decide whether we're going to test or not every year, because federal law still requires that we give an assessment in language, arts, and math every year in grades 3 through 8, and that we assess at least one time in high school, okay? But what it does do is in the past, the state was required to have an accountability system that identified every school that didn't meet a specific goal, and then had to put in some type of improvement program for those schools that did not meet that goal. What the new law says, and then the accountability system was defined by the federal government. What ESSA says is that the states have to test, and they have to have an accountability system, but they can design their own accountability system. And within that accountability system, the only schools they have to intervene in are schools that are in the bottom 5%. So if you think about the state of Oklahoma, and you think about all the schools that are across the state, and I don't know off the top of my head how many that is. We have 550 school districts. We probably have somewhere in the neighborhood, I'm just going to throw a number, let's say we have 5,000 schools across the state. And let's say that of those 5,000, 2,500 are elementary schools. The only schools that the state has to intervene in are the schools that are in the bottom 5%. So they have to intervene in those 5% of those 2,500 schools. If we have 500 high schools in the state, the only high schools they have to intervene in are high schools that have graduation rates of 67% or less. So it really offers a lot of flexibility to the state in how they design those accountability systems and exactly what happens within that accountability systems. You still have to disaggregate data for large groups within the state, so you'll have to disaggregate in our state for early childhood, or not, excuse me, for free and reduced lunch. You'll have to disaggregate for Native American. You'll probably still disaggregate for Black and Hispanic. But once you disaggregate within those groups, it's up to you to decide as a state what interventions, if any, you want to have. So if the state doesn't want to, that doesn't have to prescribe interventions, let's just say, for example, that they find that that less than 20% of your free and reduced lunch students are proficient, okay? They could intervene in that group, they could not, but they do have to report the data. The other big change is in what we do with special education students. You know, in the past, we've had rules that only 1% of the special education students within your district could take alternative assessments. That rule goes out the window. It now is up, the IEP will determine what assessment students take. The catch is that when it comes time for the state to report their numbers to the federal government, they can only count 1% of modified assessments. So, and federal law says the states cannot tell school districts they can only count 1%. It's up to the district, it's up to the IEP to decide what students will do. So that's really a big change. There are some other things that go into this, which, you know, I'm sure we'll talk about later. The current rules are still in place for next school year. The actual changes the actual new rules go into play for the 2017-18 school year. And that's to give the Department of Education time to write the rules that states will have to abide by. So it's going to be interesting. The thing that we face is that a lot of the things that we do, the fact that we give writing tests, that we give social studies tests, that we give end of instructions tests at the high school level, those are all written into state law. When No Child Left Behind was written, when Race to the Top came out, we took all of those federal regulations and we put them into state law. So it's going to take changes by the legislature to remove some of these requirements that we have. And they may or may not choose to do that, okay? The same thing with our accountability system and how many schools we identify as low performing and how we intervene. That is all in state law. A to F is state law. The teacher TLE is in state law. So all those things the legislature is going to fuss and discuss and meet on. And again, they may change, they may not change. But at least if they choose to, they'll be able to do that without being in violation of federal law. So that hammer that existed in the past, that if you don't do these things, we're going to pull your federal funding, doesn't exist.
So for this year and next year, the No Child Left Behind federal funding
The waivers
penalties, they're probably not going to be that enforceable, are they?
Yeah, I don't.
Dying out.
Right. I think they'll let it kind of fade away, and I don't see the federal government making a big deal out of any of that. And a lot of it depends on how quickly. Huh?
Ours are written in state law anyway.
But ours is in state law, so that's the issue for us, is how much of a change we're going to have in state law, if we'll have any change in state law, and that's just is a legislative battle that has to be fought. I know where parents are. Parents want less testing and they want less labeling of kids and schools. Whether the legislature agrees with that or not is a different story. And then the last thing I just want to talk briefly about is the future of Washington School. And we've had discussions about this in finance and personnel, or finance and the property committee. I've had some individual discussions with board members about the possibility of taking Washington and making that an early childhood center. The idea would be that all the 4-year-olds within our district would go to school at one place. We think there are a couple of advantages to that. One advantage is right now, just from a traffic standpoint, the fact that we have parents that show up at, is it 2:15 or 2:30? 2:30. We get out at 2:30, they probably show up at 2:15, they've got older kids they have to pick up, so we've got this traffic issue around those sites because they're waiting for kids. We also have an issue when it comes to enrollment because we put 4-year-olds where we have space, so there's not necessarily a guarantee that your 4-year-old will be in the same school where your other children are. And so what happens is that in some cases we have 4-year-olds that are in a building, not the same one that other kids are in. The other issue we have is that when children go to a 4-year-old classroom, they have a tendency to want to stay in that building because they make friends and those kinds of things. And so it kind of creates more desire for transfers which create issues with us when it comes time to do an enrollment the next year, because they all want to be in the school that they started school in, and that's understandable. I mean, we understand that. We think it will help us standardize our curriculum. We think it will help us make sure that that everything that happens with 4-year-olds is happening across the district at the same level, at the same implementation, and we think that's a positive. The other positive is that it does, when that day comes, and there will come a day when school funding will be better, and we'll be able to find teachers to reduce class sizes. It opens up space in our existing buildings to do that. This will get us basically 2 additional classrooms at every site across the district. We see those as the positive. And we can also do some things on the playground to eventually, probably won't happen right away, but we can look at that experience on the playground that students have and do some things to make that playground more of a 4-year-old playground, more activities for those kind of kids, for that age student to do that right now we're not really able to do that. Either they're on the playground with the other students, or if we have a playground for the early childhood students, it's a very small playground and it doesn't really meet their needs. What's the cost? That's always the first question, right? And so we estimate that the cost of opening Washington as an early childhood center, we have the cost figured at that at $277,000. What's included in that cost? An administrator for the site. We have to have an administrator by state law. We have to have an administrator at that site. It means we got to have office staff. We'll have to have custodial staff. We'll have to have child nutrition workers, because we will feed those students breakfast and lunch. And then we have utilities and trash service. And we've allocated some a price for office furniture for this. I think we probably have enough office furniture across the district that we could put that together for that office, but just in case, we don't, we've got a cost for that. And then on top of that, we've decided that we would prefer to put a restroom in every classroom. We've had lots of debates about those children renovating the existing bathrooms we have in Washington, and those students leaving the classroom to go to the restroom. I know that from talking to some of our 4-year-old teachers, that they were I won't say adamant, but they strongly suggested that the best situation was to have a restroom in those classrooms. And so we've estimated the cost at $190,000, which is a lot of money. But we estimated the cost at renovating the existing restrooms to meet the needs of 4-year-olds at about $170,000. So it's only $20,000 more to put the restrooms in the classrooms. So we like I said, we've discussed it, and this is just information for the board to let you know what we're looking at doing, and see if you had any additional questions for me before we start moving forward on a more official basis.
Would we have to do anything for busing? Or is it going to be up to the parents to get kids there?
We don't bus 4-year-olds.
I mean, that's the question.
Yeah, we would not do that. It would still be parent responsibility to get their children there and to pick them up. Okay. We won't be adding any buses.
Any further questions?
I just think it's a great idea. I think it's a good thing for our school district. I really do.
I agree. I think it'd be a great idea. And that's a great place to do that. It's working out. The timing's going to be coming around about the right time, assuming we can get your guarantee in writing that the funding situation is going to improve.
I won't guarantee that, but I will tell you that, we've done some projections, and so just so you'll know where we are. We are projecting right now a fund balance of a little over $3 million, and typically our fund balance increases from January to the time we get to the actual end of the year, okay? We've looked at what a 5% reduction in state aid would be for us, and that's $626,000. We've looked at some other factors, and we're pretty confident that if that were to happen, we'd still have a 6% fund balance, which is, we've been very lucky in that we've maintained a fund balance probably significantly higher than the average of school districts our size. So we're very comfortable that even with that 6% fund balance that we can fund this. If we have a 7% reduction in state aid, that kicks us up to $877,000. We'd be at 5.3%. But we could still do this. Now, I will tell you, if something happened and we ended up with more than a 7% reduction in state aid, I would probably come to the board and say, time out. But obviously, that's a board decision on how we spend those funds. I've tried to check my best sources, and nobody knows exactly what's going to happen. But everybody I've talked to seems to think that the cut, if we take a cut in state aid for the 16-17 school year, that the top end of that cut would be 5%. That it's more than likely to be 3% or less. Now, again, would anybody bet their paycheck on either one of those numbers? No. But the people I've talked to who are people I respect, and they're generally pretty close to being right. The thing that we have in our favor, if there is anything in your favor, is that this is an election year. And so while we do have lots of members of the legislature who are termed out, we also have lots who are going to stand for re-election. And I don't think anybody wants to stand for re-election if schools are being forced to close down because they don't have funds. And so I think they're going to sharpen their pencils a lot. And I think they may really get serious about some things they can do to shore up the state budget a little bit. Now, that being said, the next year we may pay for it the next year, but I think that's kind of where we are.
How many classrooms would there be?
Brett, how many classrooms are there?
We have more than that now, though, don't we?
Excuse me?
Don't we have more preschools?
We do. We've got, we've had a discussion about that. Probably what we would do would be use Roosevelt for overflow. We did that before when we were over at the Marlins Children's Home.
Really?
We had overflow at Union.
Oh.
Yeah, I didn't know that. Somebody told me that the other day. Again, as we look into the future, and the next time bond issues come up, you probably want to look at an expansion of the Washington facility and add some additional classrooms there for kids. I think probably 4-year-olds is going to be a growing part of our population. But even then, you think about it, if we were to have that kind of growth right now, we have no place for those kids to go.
Right.
So even if we open Washington up, we have overflow at Roosevelt, and we need more overflow classrooms. We've got them right now because we can't find teachers to reduce class sizes with, and it allows us to serve more 4-year-olds.
Okay.
And maybe get all our 4-year-olds in school, which is really where we'd like to be.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Any other comments? Oh, thank you, David. Moving on to the consent calendar, I'd like to point out that item 6.4 on page 4 of your agenda should not have been included. So we're going to eliminate that from being under consideration tonight. It should not have been there to begin with. So under the consent calendar, we have the agenda and commentary, minutes, consent agenda agreements under $10,000, and surplus resolution. Do we have a motion?
Motion to approve.
Thank you. Second?
Second.
Thank you, David. Call for the vote?
Mr. Riley?
Aye.
Mrs. Troop?
Aye.
Mr. Clark?
Aye.
Dr. Kincaid?
Aye.
Mr. Newsom?
Aye.
Okay, thank you. Item 6.1, consideration of and vote to approve the following district financial reports. We have A through L reports. covered by the Finance Committee. Any questions or discussion?
I'll move to approve 6.1.
Thank you, Robin.
Second.
Thank you.
Mrs. Troop?
Aye.
Mr. Clark?
Aye.
Dr. Kincaid?
Aye.
Mr. Newsom?
Aye.
Mr. Riley?
Aye.
6.2, consideration of and vote to approve accepting the AIA contract to employ construction manager, Sooner Construction Company, for the following projects from the 2015 bond issue. I'd like to read those projects. Lincoln Elementary office relocation, new concert hall, East Middle School HVAC and window replacement, West Middle School remodel, secure entrances at East Middle School, Garfield, and Roosevelt Elementary. Any discussion?
Yeah, a question I'd have of Brett, not that we'd want to change, but we're not locked in that we would have to give them all these projects. If they start not doing a good job or for whatever reason, we're not committed to every one of these just because they're listed, are we?
No, we can renegotiate that, but within their contract, if they're not performing, we can also get out of that whole contract. too.
Right, not that I have any reason to believe we wouldn't, but we're not locked in.
Right.
Okay.
Is there a motion?
Yeah, yes.
Thank you.
6.2.
Second.
Thank you, David. Call for the vote.
Mr. Clark?
Aye.
Dr. Kincaid?
Aye.
Mr. Newsom?
Aye.
Mr. Riley?
Aye.
Mrs. Troop?
Aye.
Okay, thank you. 6.3, consideration of and vote to approve accepting the AIA contract for employee construction manager Rick Scott Construction Company for the following projects from the 2015 bond issue. Contract for the Washington Elementary restrooms, administration office seminar room, high school projects on the Robson Fieldhouse remodel, brick the restrooms, new football locker room, ticket booths and fencing, weight training facility addition, remodel of the old football locker room, and awnings for the ball field, new parking lot, and press box.
Motion to approve.
Second.
Any discussions, questions?
The administration office seminar room, is that upstairs?
Yes.
Okay. That's what I thought, so, but,
Okay, call for the vote.
Dr. Kincaid?
Aye.
Mr. Newsom?
Aye.
Mr. Riley?
Aye.
Mrs. Troop?
aye.
Mr. Clark?
Aye. Okay. 6.5, consideration of and vote to approve accepting the subcontract bids for the Liberty Elementary remodel. There's items are listed. Anybody have questions? Discussion?
Motion to approve.
Thank you.
Second.
Thank you. Call for the vote.
Mr. Riley?
Aye.
Mrs. Troop?
Aye.
Mr. Clark?
Aye.
Dr. Kincaid?
Aye.
Mr. Newsom?
Aye.
Thank you. 6.6, consideration of and vote to approve the following change orders. A, approval of change order number 2 for Trout Elementary remodel addition. It's a credit of $13,523.68. B is approval for change order number 9 for the East Grand Administration Building project. This is return of the leftover contingency money for $29,399.37. Any questions or discussion? Call for the motion.
We'll make a motion for
Thank you.
6.6.
Second.
A and B.
Thank you. Call for the vote.
Mrs. Troop?
Aye.
Mr. Clark?
Aye.
Dr. Kincaid?
Aye.
Mr. Newsom?
Aye.
Mr. Riley?
Aye.
Okay, thank you. 6.7, consideration of and vote to approve a correction in the change order number 2 for Sullen Restroom. We approved this last time. It was apparently, there was a typo, and it was $300 off. The correct amount, the amount we voted last time was $11,181.49, and it should have been $11,481.49. So
No, we voted on 11,481.49, and it should have been
it should have been
11,081.
$11,181. Another $300 error.
Motion approved.
Thank you.
Second.
Thank you. Call for the vote.
Mr. Clark?
Aye.
Dr. Kincaid?
Aye.
Mr. Newsom?
Aye.
Mr. Riley?
Aye.
Mrs. Troop?
Aye.
Thank you. 6.8, consideration of and vote to approve ACE remediation plan for the district. Any questions or comments? Call for the vote. Motion?
Make a motion to approve 6.8.
Second.
Thank you. Call for the vote.
Dr. Kincaid? Mr. Newsom?
Aye.
Mr. Riley?
Aye.
Mrs. Troop?
Aye.
Mr. Clark?
Aye. Thank you. 6.9, consideration of and vote to approve PLTW biomedical courses taken at Pioneer Technology Center for academic credit. This is something, you want to discuss that real quick? Dr. Cunningham?
This is just, you can see the courses here that are part of the biomedical courses taught at the Tech Center, and if our students take they're embedded into the courses, and so they're allowed to get science credit for it. We do the same thing with some math classes that students are involved in a tech program, and they get math credit at the same time.
Is there a motion?
Move to approve it.
Thank you, Robin.
Second.
Thank you. Call for the vote.
Mr. Newsom?
Aye.
Mr. Riley?
Aye.
Mrs. Troop?
Aye.
Mr. Clark?
Aye.
Dr. Kincaid?
6.10, consideration of and vote to approve the following board policy adoptions and revisions. A is the adoption of federal programs and federal program complaints policy, and B is revision of board policy 7.04-1, school attendance. Any discussion, questions?
Motion to approve.
Thank you. Second?
Second.
Okay. Call for the vote.
Mr. Riley?
Aye.
Mrs. Troop?
Aye.
Mr. Clark?
Aye.
Dr. Kincaid? Mr. Newsom?
Aye.
Okay. 6.11, consideration of and vote to approve authorizing the superintendent of schools to cause the district to file suit seeking all necessary and appropriate relief in regard to the failure of the SDE and the OTC to follow applicable law in calculating the district's state aid. This is considering the time period prior to this last year when they were underpaying us all those years. Any
Move to
discussion?
approve.
Yeah, I've got a comment or a question. When you get into the commentary, it talks about that we will authorize all necessary legal fees and costs. In the finance committee, we put a cap on it, a dollar amount. I'm wondering if we need to amend this to include that cap, the dollar amount that we're willing to pay.
As I understand, the encumbrance is set at $50,000
But
as of
But this
now.
doesn't cover that. It would be when we encumber, yeah. 50,000 is the amount that we talked about.
Right.
But if we approve this motion as written, it says that we can pay up to all necessary legal fees and costs. I'm just wondering if we need to put the
If it
50,000.
goes above the $50,000 encumbrance, that'd have to come back to us. That's my understanding. So they'd have to come back to us if it goes over $50,000.
The 50,000 isn't written in anywhere. That was just an
No, but
arbitrary number.
But for that encumbrance, it's set for 50,000. They can't change it. They can't spend any more than that without our approval.
Yeah, you should have an encumbrance in the finance
report,
In the
didn't
finance report, you approved an encumbrance of $50,000 for Crow and Dunleavy. But I don't see it as an issue one way or the other. I mean, if the board's more comfortable with putting 50,000
matter.
language in, I think that's fine. It's whatever the board wants to do.
Would you like to make the motion to adjust that?
Well, it's up to me.
And you made one, didn't you, Don?
Yeah, we could add that if you'd like, Robin, if you feel
mean,
comfortable. I don't have a
I
problem
trust
with it.
everybody. I just sometimes don't trust the wording.
Yeah, we can add that in there on the, state apart, what would it be?
At a limit of $50,000 to the district.
Authorize payments of all necessary legal fees and costs not to exceed $50,000.
Yeah, that'd be fine.
Yeah, that'd be fine.
Was that did we have a second on that?
No.
Second.
Second. Oh.
Well, I mean, what if we need more? I mean, why are we
Then we'll come
limiting
back.
ourselves?
Then we'll come back to you.
Okay.
We have to come back then. We have to come back anyway. I
Okay.
mean, you can't, we're not gonna be, whether it's, I mean, you can increase encumbrance, I think it's 5% but without board approval, but if we come back to you, let's say it ends up being said, we're gonna have to come back to you one way or the other, either for another purchase order or to do this again.
We really
So,
want some of the others to jump in and join us.
Yeah.
That'd be fine.
Everybody through discussion?
Yeah, we're not publicizing that you guys, I'm not telling anybody you guys are doing this.
Right.
Unless it shows up in the paper now.
Call for the vote?
Mrs. Troop?
Aye.
Mr. Clark?
Aye.
Dr. Kincaid? Mr. Newsom?
Aye.
Mr. Riley?
Aye.
And again, for the board's information, so somebody asks you tomorrow, why are you guys doing that? How much money does this mean to Ponca City? And is Brenda here? All right, Brenda, you've been kind of quiet back there. Brenda, correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe that the calculation sheet you did for me estimated that if we were successful and we recovered money for all 22 years involved in this, that we would collect an additional $13 million in state aid. Is that correct? I think it's over $13 million.
I'll spend $50,000 for 13 million.
Yeah.
Well, that's kind of why I am. I mean, I told Marvin, I wish you guys would give me 100,000. I'd just go get started and not worry about anybody else.
Right.
It's wearing me out trying to get other folks to commit. It's wearing Chris out. She's doing all the work. She's sending all the information out and answering all the emails.
Okay. And 612 is consideration vote for a proposed executive session. I understand we really don't have anything to cover in executive session. So unless someone else has something they want to bring up, no, then we will skip the executive session and move on to vote 615. Vote to approve recommendations for termination, reassignment, resignation, and employment of personnel. Do I have a motion?
Yes.
Thank you.
I'll second.
Thank you. Call for the
Dr.
vote.
Kincaid?
Aye.
Mr. Newsom?
Aye.
Mr. Riley?
Aye.
Mrs. Troop?
Aye.
Mr. Clark?
Aye. Okay, any new business?
I don't have anything.
I do have one thing I want to mention to the board. I will be sending you an email with information on, next month is the month that we consider Dr. Pennington's contract. So it's that time of year again. I will send something for you to respond to. If you can speak to him directly. If you want something you want me to talk to him about when I sit down with him and have our discussion, that'd be fine too, but I will send you something in the mail, so be expecting it. And I hope to sit down with him right after the first of the year, so before the next board meeting, so. Okay, that's all I had on that. Any other questions? I want to congratulate Mr. Riley on successfully running another campaign for the school board.
Clean, no broke.
I'm not that defenseless woman. What can I say,
That's
Judy?
right.
Put up with it for 5 years.
I always get in the
Well, there may be a little bit of the concert left tonight if you want to run out to the high school to see the bands perform, so.
Maybe. They're already done.
Anything else?
I
If
move
not-
a motion to,
Motion?
Second.
Call for the vote?
Mr. Clark?
Aye.
Mrs. Troop?
Aye.
Mr. Riley?
Aye.
Mr. Newsom?
aye.
Dr. Kincaid?
Thank you very much. We can go home.